guys, today's video is going to be all about eyeshadow palettes, and I have already filmed this video once, so I'm back again because my audio wasn't working the first time. This is why I hate technology so much. Anyway, you're not here for that. You're just here to hear me talk about my palettes, so that is what we're going to do. So this tag was created by Samanthas and Ali Glines. I will have both of their videos as well as their channels listed down below in my description box, so you can go check them out if you want to, but let's just go ahead and get started. So the first question or point or whatever you want to call it says, show your newest palette. So my newest palette to my collection came into my collection 2 days ago now, and this is the new collection from Kaleidos, and this is the eyeshadow palette that was in it. So this is called the Escape Pod palette. I'm sure you've seen videos of this floating around if you follow a lot of the same people I do, but so far I'm very happy with this palette. I don't know, there's something about Kaleidos to me that is just so special, and like their aesthetic is just very me. I mean, look at this palette. Look at this palette, look at me, and look at my background. Like, isn't this just like me in a nutshell? Like, I love this. It is a little bit bulky for my liking. Like, the packaging is a little bit bulky, but it's fine. I can kind of forgive Kaleidos for having bulky packaging because I feel like at least they do it well, you know? So I'm very happy to have this in my collection, and this is by far my newest palette. Now, the next question is, show your oldest palette. I gotta say that I'm one of those people who is very good at decluttering. I don't like having things in my collection that, number one, is just old, and number two, I just don't really like and love and use anymore. So if I look at my collection and something doesn't really make me happy or something doesn't make me want to play with it for whatever reason, I'm probably going to declutter it like the next time I do a declutter. So I would say that the oldest palette that I had in my collection, I still had to kind of go through all of these and like try to figure out when I bought them. But I want to say that the oldest palette in my collection is this one from BH Cosmetics. This is the Zodiac palette, and I remember using this so much before I started my channel. I haven't really featured it like a whole ton after I started my channel. I'm going on, wow, have I been on YouTube for almost 3 years now? That can't be right. Am I going on 2 years or 3 years? Wow, time really flies. I think I'm coming up, no, I can't be coming up to 3 years, right? Okay, yeah, 2 years. I had to check that. I was like, there is no way I've been on YouTube for 3 years. It's been 2 years, almost 2 years. My 2-year anniversary is on June 29th, I'm pretty sure. So I've had this probably for 2 years before. No, can't have been that long. Wow, my memory is awful. I'm sure you guys have noticed before, but anyway, pretty sure this is my oldest palette in my collection. And I still really like this palette. Like, when I look at this, it makes me want to use it. So I'm not going to declutter it, even though I haven't used it in a very long time. If you want to see me do a video where I like try the oldest products in my collection or something, maybe let me know. I mean, I'm not one of those people who have products that are 10 years old and have mold on them and stuff like that, so it probably wouldn't be that funny. But I would say that this is probably the oldest palette in my collection. Obviously, I've had palettes that have been way older. I had basically all of the Naked palettes for a while there, at least 1, 2, and 3. And I also had some of the Vice palettes from Urban Decay like back in the day, but I don't have those anymore because they were old, so I decluttered them. So this is probably the palette that is the oldest in my collection as of this very moment. Next one says, show your most expensive palette. And I have two here that I want to show you. They're both from Natasha Denona, but these are not the most expensive palettes that I have bought, because I actually bought one of the like the very expensive palettes from her, the $230 something palettes that is just absurdly expensive. Yeah, I bought one of those before I started my channel, and I ended up actually giving away like half of that palette to a friend of mine. I depotted the shadows that I really wanted to keep, and I put them into like an empty palette. So I don't actually have the palette itself anymore, which I majorly regret now, because having a channel, it would have been really nice to be able to have that to do like reference and stuff, but I didn't even know I was going to start my channel when I gave that to her. So hopefully she's gotten a lot more use out of it, but it was the blue and purple palette, is that what it was called? I don't know. I really wish I had that still in my collection now, because I feel like I would have been able to make really good content with that palette. But the ones that I do have in my collection is the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. These are the $129 palettes, very expensive again. I bought this one as well before I started my channel, before I really knew like what colors I liked myself. This was kind of one of those, ooh, this looks like it would be such a good everyday and neutral and whatever palette, when in reality I didn't realize that I didn't like neutrals at the time. But I did get a little bit of use out of it, and I do think that the quality is good. I don't think it's as good as the next one I'm going to show you though. This is the Metropolis palette. This is what the palette looks like, and I do think that this palette is a little bit too on the neutral side, but honestly, the neutrals in this palette are just phenomenal, and so are all of these other colors. Like, I will be mentioning this palette in this tag a couple of times, so I'm not going to go on about this, but I really enjoy this palette. I don't regret spending my money on this whatsoever because I think it is amazing. I also do have one of the large Pat McGrath palettes, but I'm pretty sure that those are $125 and the Natasha Denona ones are $128 or $9. So the most expensive would definitely be these ones, but I do have the Decadence palette, you know, the one that keeps being limited edition and then being brought back as like other things. So like it came back as like the Star Wars edition Decadence palette, and it's been a lot of different things, but I have the one that just came out as like the original. So I do have that in my collection. It's an all shimmer palette. I don't use it very often. So let's move from talking about my most expensive palette to my least expensive palette. So these are my cheapest palettes. I have two I want to show you because honestly, they cost the same and they're just from different brands. I gotta say though, I am personally not really into drugstore eyeshadows. I've watched so many of these tags and everyone is like, I have this $3 e.l.f. palette. And I'm like, I don't have any drugstore palettes. I'm sorry. I'm very picky with what I like in my eyeshadows, and I feel like it's such a risk buying eyeshadows from the drugstore because my expectations are so high and my standards for eyeshadows are so high now because of all of these amazing indie brands that I've tried that I don't even bother trying eyeshadows from the drugstore because to me, I just feel like I'm going to be disappointed. I would rather spend a little bit of extra money getting something that is more special. So the cheapest palettes in my collection are number one, the monochromatic palettes from ColourPop. So this is just the Smoke Show palette. I really enjoy this. This is probably my favorite out of the bunch. I have a lot of these. I have probably 12 or something like that. I don't know. I have a bunch of these monochromatic ones and this is probably my favorite. I really enjoy this. I'm pretty sure these are $12, and I also have a palette from BH Cosmetics. This is the Illusion palette. This is one of the 16 pans. I don't know if they still make these. I bought this on a whim. I saw it on their website and I was like, I've never seen that, and it turned out it launched the same day as I saw it, so I ended up picking it up just so I could make a video with it. I thought the quality was good. I mean, it's a very, very cute palette, and I really like that the pan sizes are so small. Like, this would make for an amazing travel palette, and I know I said that in my review as well, and I've never traveled with it, but technically it would make for a really good travel palette because it's very small and compact and there's a lot of options in there. And I really like this. I've seen this on sale for like $8 before too. So if this is something that looks like something you would like, you'd probably like it. The next question I actually do not have an answer to, and this is show your everyday palette. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know that I jump around like crazy. I also do consider myself to be an eyeshadow palette review channel. So for that reason, I just don't have time to have an everyday palette. Like, I film 95% of the time I do my makeup, and when I'm not filming, I'm just not really doing eyeshadow because it means I'm in a hurry and I just need a little bit of makeup to make myself feel better. And if I don't have time to do like a fun eyeshadow look, I'm just not even going to do eyeshadow. So everyday eyeshadow for me is just not really a thing. Like, I like to test out new things. I like to play around. I'm not one of those people who like to use the same thing over and over and over again when it comes to eyeshadow. So I don't think I will ever have an everyday eyeshadow palette. I think that even if I was forced to use only brown eyeshadows for the rest of my life, I would still probably jump around and like play with different palettes and just, you know, experiment a little bit because I'm not that kind of person, so I don't have an answer to that. Now, the next one I definitely have an answer to, and this is show your most colorful palette. Now, I've seen someone else do this tag as well. I think it was Amy from Amy Loves Makeup. She mentioned the same palette in the same question, and this is the Glamlight Cake palette. So this is such a fun palette. I had the best time when I reviewed this. So this is what the inside of the palette looks like. It is like the most basic rainbow palette in the world, but I think it is beautiful. The mattes in this just perform like a dream. They are so pigmented, so easy to work with, and they just make me happy. They make me smile. These kind of colors just get me in a good mood. It makes me want to be creative. It makes me want to do something with it. I don't regret buying this at all. I think it's an amazing palette, and was it something that I needed in my collection? Not at all. But I do feel like it kind of filled the gap in my collection still, because even though I do have all of these shades like individually, either spread out or in my singles, I don't really have a lot of rainbow palettes. So for me, this was kind of something that I felt like I needed in a weird way, even though I definitely didn't. But I'm very happy I have this palette. And if you guys have not tried Glamlight and you've been thinking about it, I can highly vouch for their formula. I think that their formula is amazing. Now let's talk about size. So I'm first going to show you my smallest eyeshadow palettes, and this was kind of tough for me because I have everything ranging from duos to trios to quads to like bigger palettes, and I didn't know exactly where to draw the line. Like I felt like a duo is not really an eyeshadow palette, so I guess like a trio would be the closest that I would get to an eyeshadow palette, and I also didn't know if I should show you like based on the size of the actual palette or based on the number of shadows. So I'm going to show you a couple here. So I do have two of these trios from Anna Sui, none of which are really my color scheme. They did send me these and I'm very grateful, and I'm definitely not going to declutter them at all because I think that they are so cute. So this is the first one. Like I said, not really my kind of thing because these are all kind of satiny shades and I don't really use that, but I don't know. There's something about this brand that just makes me never, ever, ever want to declutter any of it. And I just want to collect it all. And it's kind of one of those like Pokemon, gotta catch them all. I just think that these are so cute. So here is the other one. This is more of a neutral one if I can get this open. So again, definitely not my color scheme in the slightest, but there's no way I'm ever getting rid of these. I'm just not. And the other one that I also want to show you is probably like my smallest when it comes to like pan sizes, and this is one of the mini Natasha Denona palette. This is the mini gold palette. I really like this palette actually. This shade right here is just so stunning. Like I don't know if you see how wet looking that shadow is. It is just everything. It's definitely my favorite in this palette. Oh, just look at that shine and texture. It's so beautiful. I'm very happy that I bought this. I also do have this one that I want to show you. I almost forgot about this. So this is from Blush Tribe. This is a quad. Actually, I have another quad too from Nomad Cosmetics, but that one is a lot bigger. So again, it's just really hard to know like where to draw the line when it comes to my smallest palette, but I want to show you this as well. This brand doesn't exist anymore. This quad doesn't exist anymore. It is limited edition, but still in my collection. I really enjoy it. I like bringing this traveling along with something else if I need like some of these colors that maybe aren't in the palettes that I want to bring. I'll just chuck this in there because it's a very durable package, and the way that these shadows are pressed, they're not going to break in travel, which I really appreciate. So yeah, I like that little quad. Now let's talk about my biggest palette. So this one was kind of tricky because I didn't know if I should go on based on the number of shades in the palette or the actual size of the palette. So I kind of picked out two, one in each category. So like my biggest palette in terms of the size of the palette, I gotta say, I don't really buy a lot of very large palettes because I prefer more curated and smaller color stories. And also as someone who reviews palettes, reviewing something that has like 39 shades,
Morphe, I'm looking at you.
it sucks. Like that's a lot of work, and I would rather not have to do like 20 looks with a palette before I review it, which I feel like I kind of have to do with palettes that are that big. So I don't buy a lot of big palettes for that reason. But the largest palette in my collection, which is also the most bulkiest and most annoying to store, is definitely this one from Jeffree Star. This is the Bloodlust palette. This is the newest one in his collection, except for the cremated palette, which hasn't really gotten to anybody yet. I don't think. I didn't even get that palette. But this is definitely the biggest palette in my collection in terms of like the size itself. And also it's really annoying to open. It's really annoying to hold. It's really annoying to store. But the color story is beautiful and it performs really well, and I'm still happy I have it. And I do really like the velvet packaging. I know some people didn't like that, but I'm still happy I have this in my collection, even though it's kind of annoying to store. Now, the biggest palette in terms of number of shades is definitely my Morphe and Jaclyn Hill Volume 2 palette. I'm sure most of you have seen this, but here's what the palette looks like. It's a beautiful palette. I really had a good time playing with this, and I think the quality is great. Again, it's a very large palette, and I just don't really enjoy large palettes, but I can appreciate this for what it is, and I'm not mad that I have this at all. Now let's talk about the palette that has my best memory connected to it. And this was kind of hard, and I almost surprised myself by picking this palette out because when I was looking through my palettes, I couldn't really think of a lot of memories that were connected to my eyeshadow palettes because most of the time I do my makeup, I just do my makeup, on YouTube or by myself. I'm just usually in my house doing my makeup, so I don't have that many memories attached to my makeup. But this palette is one that I brought traveling last year, and this is the Magic Mini palette by Juvia's Place. I brought this to New York when I was there with my mom, and we just had the best time, and I used this palette on my eyes every single day when we were there, and I just really enjoyed it. I had a great time. We had a great trip. The memories that kind of came with me wearing this makeup, I got a lot of compliments when I was there wearing this, and we did, like I said, we just had a really, really good trip, and I really miss traveling. This makes me think of, you know, back when the world wasn't a scary place and you could go out and not have to worry about it. But those times are gone. Hopefully they'll be back soon. But as of this very moment, it doesn't seem like it. Anyway, let's just talk about makeup because that is way more interesting. All right, so next up is show a palette that's worth the hype. This one was kind of hard for me because as someone who usually buys palettes as soon as they launches, I don't really get to see like other people's opinions on things before I buy it. So I kind of have to look at this in terms of what did I buy that ended up being worth the hype that everyone else liked as much as I did. And honestly, I'm going to talk about the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette again. When I bought this at Sephora, which is a makeup convention that was in LA last year, back when traveling was okay. Anyway, this is the palette, and the reason I bought this was mainly because this was like an early release, and this palette was released at Sephora before it was even in store, so I definitely jumped on that opportunity because I wanted to be able to review it as fast as possible. And on top of it, I mean, I do really like the color story, and it's Natasha Denona, and I do really like her formula. When I first bought this, I didn't know if there was going to be any hype around it, but I mean, people ended up loving this palette, and so did I. I think that the quality of this is just... it's A+. Honestly, there's no shade in this palette that I don't like the formula of, and I just think that it performs like a dream. I love the packaging on this. Like, this is another palette that is a travel palette for me because it feels very sturdy, and also the way that the shadows are pressed are not very fragile, and I really appreciate that about shadows when I feel like I can put them in my suitcase and just not have to worry about them breaking, because a lot of my indie shadows are so fragile that if I need to bring them traveling, like I basically have to wrap them around in something and put them in my purse that I'm going to be carrying all the time. I can't be like risking putting it in a suitcase or something, but this is definitely something that I feel like I can travel with and just not have to worry about, which is amazing. Now, let's talk about a palette that was not worth the hype, and that was very, 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 very easy for me. This is the Conspiracy palette by Jeffree Star that he did in collaboration with Shane Dawson. I am sure that you have all seen this 100 million times, but I will show it to you anyway. So here's what the palette looks like, and I just thought that the quality of this palette was way worse than most of the other palettes that I have from him. Honestly, all of the palettes that I have from him. Like, the shimmers in this palette were just... they were terrible. They were so just bland and boring and didn't have like anything special going. Some of these mattes were just impossible. Like, this yellow is one of the worst mattes that I think I've ever tried in my entire life. There are some shades in here that I do really like, but overall as a palette, I am just not very impressed by this. And the amount of hate that I got on my review video is crazy. I don't want to talk about it, so let's move on. The next one says, show your favorite palette from a favorite brand. So I'm gonna show you this one because my absolute favorite palette from this brand is discontinued, so I figured I would show my favorite palette that is still available. And this is the Whale Song palette by Menagerie Cosmetics. If you guys are not new to my channel, you know how much I love not only this palette, but also this brand. And this color story just makes my heart so happy. I mean, greens and blues is just my favorites. I can't help it. I just feel like they look so good on me. It looks really good with my eye color, and the formula in this is fantastic. There's nothing not to like about this palette, and it just has some very unique tones in it that I don't have in any other palette, and I just get such good looks every time I use this, and I love it. I don't know what else to say. It's just an amazing palette. And lastly, show your most used palette. That's kind of hard because, like I said before, I'm one of those people who don't like to use the same thing over and over again. So for me, like, my most used palettes would probably be whatever palettes I've done a 10 looks one palette with, because those I've done 10 looks with, plus, you know, probably used them off camera or in other videos a few times. So I would say that my most used palette is, again, the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette, because I dip into this sometimes if I'm not filming, and even if it's just for one shade, like, I just love how these shadows perform. And I don't know, there's something about this palette that just kind of speaks to me, even though you probably would look at this and be like, I don't understand why you are so drawn to this palette, because these aren't really my colors. But once you start playing with this and just understand like how easy it is to work with and how good this palette really is, I think you would understand. Like, it's just a very, very solid palette. And that is why that is my used palette in my collection. There are a couple of bonus questions here, so let me just go through those. So it says, show your best dupe palette. Now, I do have a lot of palettes from Alter Ego, and I do want to give them a shout out because I think that these are amazing palettes. All of these palettes are dupes for Natasha Denona, the ones that I have here. So the first one is the Goddess palette. This is a dupe for the gold palette, and the quality of this is amazing. And these are like less than $20, and the packaging is very, very sturdy. It feels very luxurious. It's very heavy. It's got a really nice magnetic closure. It's got a mirror, and the quality of the shadows are just great. So I do want to shout these out because if you guys have been thinking about maybe getting a Natasha Denona palette, but you're not sure you're willing to fork out the price for it, or maybe you just want to test out the color story to see if you really like it before you splurge on the actual thing, maybe just get one of these and test it out. So the next one is the Aurora palette. This is a dupe for the Sunrise palette. Yeah, I think it's a Sunrise palette, but this is beautiful as well. I really had a good time when I used all of these. Lastly, we have the Sahara palette, which I forget what this is a dupe for. I think it's for the, why do I always forget the name of that palette? Yeah, I don't know. I'll have it on the screen. But anyway, this is also a dupe for one of the Natasha Denona palettes. And again, quality is great. I really enjoy this. I do have an unaffiliated code with Alter Ego if you do want to go buy something. I don't get anything for it, but it will give you guys a discount. And I'm very happy I have that code because this is a brand that I actually really enjoy. And the last question, I'm probably just going to skip this because it says, what palette did you rediscover through this tag? And I store my palettes in a way where I kind of go through them all the time and they're all out on display so I can always see them. So if I'm doing some kind of a video that's relating to palettes, I always kind of flip through my palettes and I feel like I have a good grasp of like what I have. Like I don't really ever forget that something is in my collection just because it is usually out in front of me and it's not in drawers. So it's not like I kind of go, oh, I forgot I had that, or like, you know what I mean? Like I usually know what I have and so I know what's available to me, even though I do have a large eyeshadow collection, maybe not that big. I don't know. Would you consider my eyeshadow palette collection to be big? I would say I have probably 130 palettes if I had to guess. I don't know. It could be more. It could be like 140 or 50. I really don't know, but I would consider myself to have a pretty large eyeshadow palette collection. So considering that, I feel like I have a good grasp of like what is in my collection. So I wasn't really surprised or felt like I found palettes that I didn't know I had or anything like that. But this was a really good tag. I've had so much fun just like watching other people's videos as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I did get some requests to do this, so I'm happy I finally sat down and did it. So thank you so much for watching this video. As always, don't forget to check out their channels and their videos as well. And if you want to see some other tag videos, here's my playlist. And if you're new, I would love it if you would consider subscribing, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.